Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are talking directly to you, the executive audience, the leaders, architects, and decision makers of the digital age. We're going to explore the introduction to the International Organization for Standardization 31700-1 standard for consumer protection. Specifically, we'll be looking at privacy by design for consumer goods and services, zeroing in on Part 1, high-level requirements. Let's just jump right in and unpack how you can fundamentally transform your organization's approach to data. All right, let's get into it. This vital work is brought forward by the International Electrotechnical Commission Joint Technical Committee 1, Subcommittee 44, alongside the Canadian Mayor Committee. Their efforts are absolutely crucial for the modern digital economy. Look, today, consumer trust isn't just a nice-to-have. It is the definitive currency of the digital realm. Earning and keeping that trust takes way more than just slapping a confusing privacy policy on the footer of your website. It requires a high-fidelity architectural approach to privacy right from the very blueprint stage of your product or service. I want you to really think about this core thesis for a second. The individual need not bear the burden of striving for protection. That is such a powerful statement, right? For way too long, the onus has been heavily dumped on the consumer to navigate these incredibly complex settings, confusing menus, and endless opt-out loops. Well, this standard flips the script entirely. It demands that privacy has to be a fundamental requirement built into the very fabric of every single product you create. It literally cannot be an afterthought anymore. It has to be the default. To pull this off, the standard outlines 3 guiding pillars. Let's kick things off with Pillar 1, empowerment and complete transparency. So what exactly are we protecting here? The standard zeroes in on personally identifiable information. We're talking about any data that can establish a link to a natural person, whether that's directly or indirectly. And protecting this isn't just about cybersecurity or, checking a legal box for compliance. It is the absolute foundation of consumer empowerment. If you can't protect this core data, there's no way you can build a genuine foundation of trust. Now, complete transparency requires some real decisive action in practice. Your communication strategies have to be crystal clear. Consumers must receive highly accurate privacy assertions before they even acquire your product. But we're actually going a step further than that. You have to design human-computer interfaces that genuinely take into account all consumer capabilities. And yes, that includes potential disabilities. Your documentation has to explicitly lay out exactly how their personally identifiable information is going to be handled, making sure anyone using your platform can make a confident, completely informed decision. Beyond just telling consumers what you're doing, you've got to hand over the keys. And that brings us to the consumer configurable privacy setting. By giving folks robust, super easy to understand settings, you're making sure they remain fully in control of their own data. They get to make specific, granular choices about how their information is processed. That shows a fundamental respect for their privacy rights. And honestly, it's a massive step forward in building brand loyalty. So to wrap up this first pillar, empowering consumers to manage their own data is a critical, absolutely essential check against the misuse of personally identifiable information. When you build highly usable systems with transparent, human-centered designs, you aren't just hitting a compliance metric. You are creating substantial economic and reputational value for your organization. You are building something people fundamentally trust. Moving right along, let's look at Pillar 2, institutionalization and operational responsibility. Now we're shifting our focus inward, looking directly at your corporate architecture. And let's be real, implementing this isn't always a walk in the park. There's going to be some real-world friction, because good design on the outside requires ironclad responsibility on the inside. And that starts at the absolute top. A demonstrated leadership commitment is essential. Executives cannot just view privacy as a legal hurdle anymore. They've got to treat privacy decisions as consistent, systematic, functional requirements of the entire product design process. If leadership isn't championing privacy by design, your engineering and product teams are going to hit a brick wall trying to implement it. So how do we actually institutionalize this and break down those organizational silos? Well, the standard lays out some very clear steps. Step 1, assign a specific accountable person for each function contributing to privacy controls. Step 2, establish multifunctional teams. You want engineering, legal, marketing, and design all sitting at the same table. And Step 3, ensure that the accountable person is actually managing the overall effectiveness of those controls throughout the entire product lifecycle. Delineating accountability across all of your business and technical stakeholders is exactly how you stop structural failures before they happen. I know, documentation isn't always the most glamorous topic, but meticulous record-keeping forms the absolute backbone of institutional responsibility. You need specific categories here. You've got to have privacy risk assessments to spot those hidden vulnerabilities. You need data flow maps to trace the exact journey of personally identifiable information as it moves through your complex systems. And your functional privacy requirements and communication protocols, those ensure that whatever you promise the consumer is technically implemented, tracked, and rigorously maintained. And that brings us to Pillar 3, the ecosystem and product lifecycle. Think about this as two incredibly complex, parallel journeys. On one side, you have your standard product design lifecycle. Concept, design, development, release, and eventually end of use. But on the other side, running concurrently, you have the personally identifiable information lifecycle. That's collection, use, retention, disclosure, and destruction. These two life cycles have to be perfectly synchronized. Your data collection and destruction practices must align with the product's life cycle at every single stage. The crucial takeaway here is that organizations absolutely must take a holistic approach. It's like a giant puzzle. You have to consider contextual factors, even the ones that feel outside of your direct control, like third-party integrations, external APIs, or cloud processors. Having robust privacy resilience means looking at the entire information ecosystem and making sure your strict standards hold up at every single touch point. Basically, squashing third-party risks before they even materialize. Now, to help you actually translate all these high-level frameworks into grounded action, the International Organization for Standardization provides a companion technical report. This is part 2 of the standard, and it's dedicated entirely to real-world use cases. It beautifully bridges the gap between the theoretical requirements we've just covered and the messy, practical realities of everyday product development. Let's look at a couple of these examples to really bring this to life. Take something we're all familiar with, a smart lock for a front door. In a basic configuration, your privacy ecosystem revolves around just one primary homeowner. Simple enough, right? But what happens when you introduce a family configuration or roommates? Suddenly you are dealing with incredibly complex privacy variables involving kids, temporary guests, service workers, and shared living spaces. The product variation dramatically shifts the required privacy architecture. The system has to instantly adapt to protect the privacy of all those different users living within that shared real-world ecosystem. Another great use case covered in the report is a fitness company health application. This one perfectly highlights how processing highly sensitive data, stuff like specific health metrics, precise location tracking, and granular biological data, demands even stricter lifecycle management and transparency. The inherent risk to the consumer is just so much higher here, and that means your functional privacy requirements and your leadership accountability absolutely have to scale up to match that risk. Now, a massive yet constantly overlooked part of ecosystem management is the very end of the line. What happens when your product finally retires? Well, step 1 is meticulously planning for that digital legacy or end-of-life withdrawal way ahead of time. Step 2, you've got to notify consumers well in advance and offer them some viable alternatives. And step 3 is defining strict retention criteria. You absolutely must securely and responsibly dispose of all personally identifiable information when a product is retired or if a consumer just decides to stop using it. All right, let's bring all of this together for our conclusion: securing the digital economy. These 3 pillars we just covered, empowerment, institutionalization, and the ecosystem, they aren't just suggestions. They are a strategic roadmap. Implementing the International Organization for Standardization 31700 standard completely transforms privacy from a heavy compliance burden into a very distinct competitive advantage. Advancing privacy by design establishes your organization as a true leader in data protection. In a marketplace where massive data breaches are making front-page news every single week, proving that you possess that structural architectural integrity is exactly how you earn long-term consumer trust. So I want to leave you with one final critical question to really assess your own leadership commitment here. Is your organization treating privacy as an afterthought, just some hasty patch applied right before launch day? Or is privacy fundamentally built into the architectural integrity of your products, guaranteeing that the individual never has to bear the burden of their own protection? Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and we will see you next time.